There she is right there, everybody. I don't know if you guys can even hear the music or anything, but let me fix the. I'm gonna fix the audio here really quick. And we got Alison Galvani on here, Galvani, and her. She's gonna tell us the story about how her mother Nancy was, you know, extremely likely to have been killed. I mean, I don't know of a different term to use, but by her father. In a divorce issue, and who knows, maybe he didn't want to pay child support, something like that. And it's pretty interesting. We went over it last night, so most of the people watching probably have the general ideas, but she's going to go over it again. And let me make it so we're just both on the screen right here. There you go. See. So she's going to go over it again. Are you unmuted?
I'm unmuted. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, and then you can go over it again from the beginning, and we're just going to kind of try to keep it steered to getting into the factual elements, and then we can start asking questions and see what we can figure out. Who knows? Let me see if I can check my audio.
Thank you so much, Gray, for covering it.
Yeah, no problem. So do I need to put echo cancellation? Do you have echoing going on? I just turned it on, echo cancellation, so maybe it's better.
Oh, do you? I don't hear an echo. Do you?
No, I'm fine. Oh, I see. Okay, yep. All right, so go ahead. Let's start from the beginning.
Okay, sure. Well,
tell us a little bit about yourself first, and then do that. Just
sure.
so they know who you are.
Yeah, and Gray and I were talking earlier, so it's just a viewer beware. And he said, you go off on too many tangents. People are gonna have a hard. This is the first tangent, I guess. People are gonna have a hard time following. You got to talk linearly. And I told him, well, I have ADHD. I have trouble with that. So I won't be at all offended if Gray reins me in from the many tangents I'll probably go on to. But you want me to start with my current life? Is that what you said? Or
yeah, I guess you could just say what you're doing now, and sort of, and then work your way backwards, I guess, to the back then.
Sure. So, my name's Alison Galvani. I live in Connecticut with my 3 teenagers, 2 daughters and a boy, and I'm a professor at Yale School of Public Health, and I have 3 dogs as well.
Yeah, I saw one of them. Looks like Gracie. I have a Maltese and just by itself. You have a Yorkie Maltese mix.
Oh, she's a Shih Tzu Malt.
Oh, Shih Tzu. That's right, Shih Tzu. I was thinking of Yorkie, but that's what I wanted. I wanted to have one of those.
There she is.
Look at that, huh?
Yeah.
Yep. All right, so that's what you're doing now, and obviously in 1982, August 8th, it seems like your mother was, killed, obviously, because she was found inside of a sleeping bag, weighted down with some small rope, and then put into the, I guess the San Francisco Bay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so maybe just go back and
should I go back to just quickly their marriage and the divorce process?
Yeah, you could do that. Yeah,
okay.
Do that first.
Okay, so my parents met in New York City when my mother was getting a master's in social work from Fordham University, and my father was working for investment consultant company, and they got married in New York. They moved to San Francisco. They bought, this is going to be pertinent because these 2, if we go into the 2 addresses, they bought 2 houses next to each other. And we lived in one of them. They rented out the other unit. So, so that's the one we lived in. And these are the 2 houses. So
you lived in that one, and this is the other one you had right here.
Right. The one we lived in is a duplex. So there's like a tenant upstairs, and then my bedroom which is going to also become pertinent in the story, from what I heard and saw, Yeah, my bedroom was that front room down there. So like I could hear when the garage door was being opened and that type of thing. And then they also owned that brown building that had tenants in it as well. So anyway, my father was becoming increasingly violent, and one instance that I think is particularly telling, given how she was killed. Well, I heard them like arguing many times, but one time was particularly extreme. I ran into their bedroom, and he had her like pinned down on the bed, with his knees like holding her arms down, and he was straddling her and holding a pillow over her face. I was begging him to stop, and he did stop. Like over the years, I asked him why he was doing that, and he said, "Oh, she was screaming, and he wanted to quiet her down for the neighbors." So she cited that event. So to friends, she said like she considered he was trying to kill her, and that he would have killed her then if I hadn't been there begging him to stop. And that's, I think, what precipitated her decision to get divorced. That and other, instances of violence. She filed for divorce at the beginning of the summer of 1982. I was
just like a couple months before, like in June, right? Something like that.
Right. So like basically, as soon as I finished kindergarten, she filed for divorce. We went to live in, it was then called a battered women's shelter. And I was, spending the most of the summer with her. Towards the end of the summer, they had a temporary, agreement that I was going to see him on weekends. And the second weekend when I was with him is when she was murdered.
So what's this? Was the shelter at the 44 McAllister Street?
It's a little bit complicated. That wasn't a battered women's shelter per se. We moved to battered women's shelter that, was free. A lot of women there, were essentially homeless, and it was run by nuns. Someone had made a comment to her while we were there that, this, because she had more means than most of the other women there, that this isn't intended for someone like you. And she said, okay, we'll move out. And they told her, oh, no, you don't have to move out. We didn't mean it. We didn't mean it like that. And she said, no, we're going to move out. So anyway, that's when we moved. So we were like at the battered women's shelter for, a few weeks. And then we moved to McAllister.
So right when she filed the divorce, or were you in that before the divorce was filed?
Essentially, she filed for divorce at the same time as we moved into a battered women's shelter.
Okay. Did she leave because she was being battered?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So what you noticed, you probably didn't see all the different times that she was being attacked by him, I would imagine. It's kind of a small place, but you saw a couple of times, but maybe there was other times, maybe when you weren't even in school yet, right?
Well, I was in kindergarten.
Okay.
The tenants, this is in some of the affidavits, they said that they, like this Melissa Mead, Gray and we were just talking about, she said like she often heard fights and she heard me crying. But I'm sure I didn't witness everything. I think there was one instance when I was at a friend's house. There was just like, it was kind of ongoing violence.
Yeah, but you might not remember as much. Like you were saying, after your mom died, you sort of sealed in your memory that time frame then, but maybe prior to that, you didn't see her in every single,
right.
Because I know that my biological dad, I think he attacked my mom and she left him, but I don't remember I just remember them yelling sometimes. but
Yeah,
that's
I
not really
remember
what
that
it was.
the incident with the smothering of the pillow, and I remember thinking, "Oh, this is worse than normal." Um, before I ran into their room, but I don't necessarily remember like really other specific instances. I just remember very well that instance and thinking, "Oh, this is worse than normal."
Yeah, so you were in the battered shelter for a few weeks, and then you moved to the 44 McAllister Street. Is that just an apartment?
Yeah, it was my father made a big deal about it. It was in the Tenderloin, which is not like the best neighborhood in San Francisco. But yeah, it was a low it was an inexpensive like residential hotel.
And what was your mother doing for work at the time? Did she work?
Um she was working at San Francisco. Well, when I was so she had been a social worker, and she was working at in San Francisco General Hospital as a social worker in the pediatric department. Then when I was born, she stayed home with me, and she was starting to go back and doing like some volunteer work, but essentially she didn't have a full-time job at this point.
Okay. Yeah, so then I wonder if, I mean, just to throw in there the incentive for the dad, your dad is like, well, he's going to have to like pay a huge, way more in child support if she got custody, because then it would have to even be like alimony, child
Yeah.
support, everything,
Yeah, definitely. And I saw some of the uh divorce filings, and yeah, he was arguing, I don't know, maybe it's typical that he shouldn't have to pay. Oh, sorry, but
Okay.
oh, my daughter's coming home, the dogs get excited. Oh, hi Emily, I'm on a YouTube thing. Okay. Oh, sorry, what were you saying?
We were just talking about,
alimony. Yeah, he
yeah.
said in divorce filings that he was trying to argue for no alimony and even no child support, because I was just, when I saw this relatively, I was just shocked that like, because I did some like childhood modeling, and he said as a 5-year-old that I could support myself.
Well, that's kind of weird. Yeah, I think there's, I mean, over the years we've been covering so many stories, and that seems to be a huge element in a lot of these cases when there's like a divorce, or even when somebody's pregnant, they kill the lady that's pregnant because they don't want to have to pay child support, because they don't even want to be with the person. And maybe in this case, they didn't like each other, and the child support part is what always seems to be the kicker. Like for example, if there wasn't any children involved at all, they would just separate and go their own ways, unless she wanted to have alimony, then there'd be another problem.
Yeah, and she was asking for alimony. And I'm sure the argument that like, oh, he shouldn't have to pay alimony or child support, that wouldn't have held up. Like, I just noticed like that was one thing he filed. Yeah. And also, these two houses are and were like really valuable, and because this is a very good neighborhood in San Francisco. Like for instance, 1871 Green Street, it sold for last year for like 5.2 million.
Which one?
This is one of them.
18, one of those two houses?
1871 Green Street, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, let's see, how much was it?
I bet it was
over
$1 million.
5 million. And that actually, probably the other one was more valuable. So
you think so? I think 1871 looks better.
Well, it was assessed for higher value. Because it's 5 units, and each apartment in San Francisco can be
well, 1871 looks better, on well, paper. As a single, this looks like a better unit, better building, kind of nicer, But either way, it doesn't really matter. So let's do the.
It sold for 5.4 million. And
okay.
Anyway, but that is less. It is less valuable. I might look nicer, but the brown one has 5 units, and
Mm.
it was very lucrative, 5 rents in San Francisco.
Okay. So I guess, okay, so now we see what was going on. They filed for divorce. You guys lived in a shelter for a little bit, then kind of settled in at kind of a bad, not really the greatest place in the world, at 44, I think it's at 44 McAllister Street. And so then you were staying with him that weekend, like the 7th and 8th, that Saturday and Sunday, the 7th and 8th. And you were supposed to even be there till the 9th, right? You were supposed to be there on 7th, 8th, and 9th. And then tell us what's going on now. Or is there any more that you need to add to the pre?
Do you want to, maybe, should we mention the weekend before, like the first time I stayed with him?
Oh, sure, if you want to, if there's something significant in there. Yeah, so the weekend before,
right. So as there's some things that Ray read yesterday from her diary. So she was reporting in her diary what I was telling her. And although only one of these things do I have like an independent memory of, but I apparently, so his mother had come out that weekend from Minnesota, and I told my mom that they were planning something mean and secret. When you were reading it yesterday or having the AI do it, it kept saying like mean and sweet. It was mean and secret. So
yeah. I was just trying to get,
this is me reporting to her that was happening. Like I had an inkling somehow. So, and also that weekend they enrolled me in a different school for first grade, he and his mother, and they told me not to tell my mother. And I did end up going to that different school. So that was also really odd, like it's like he knew that she would be dead and he wouldn't need to discuss what school.
So what was that again on that day you went to? He discussed another school with you, or you went to what? Say that again.
The weekend before that I was with him.
Yeah, like on the first, something like that.
Yeah, was it the first or was it every weekend I was seeing him at the time? I mean, it was only 2 weeks. It was the second weekend when she was killed, but
either the 30th or the first.
The previous time I was with him, his mother came out. They took me. This is the part I like explicitly remember. They took me to another school. This was during the summer, so enrolled me in a different school, a Catholic school in San Francisco. I had been in a public school previously, and they told me not to tell her.
Okay.
So then I went back. I spent and I didn't tell her. That's not in her diary. Like they told me not to tell her. I didn't tell her.
Well, why did they care if they told you not to tell her about maybe going to a different school?
They enrolled me in a different school and told me.
Enrolled you in? Okay, they were.
Yeah, and I went to that school. Like I ended up going to that school.
Okay, but when they enrolled you, you hadn't been to the school yet. It was just going to come
they just
after.
brought me to like meet the, to be interviewed or whatever at the school.
Man, and when you say they, who's they?
Oh, his mother, him, my father, and his mother. So then I went. So that was the weekend where she wasn't.
Your grandparents and your father. Is that what you're saying?
Well, his mother, not his father as well.
Oh, his
mother came out from Minnesota. We looked at this other school. They enrolled me there. They told me not to tell her.
That's so interesting. That's another piece of circumstantial evidence.
Yeah. I mean,
it really just is crazy because that means they didn't want her to know because she didn't want her to start something before she was killed.
Her next week anyway, so why get her?
Well, they wanted her to be dead.
Yeah, and probably there was some like deadline because this was in August, where they had deadline for enrollment. And I did go to that school,
but they didn't want you. They didn't want your mom to have you. They didn't want you to tell your mom because as soon as they told her, she would start looking into things.
Yeah, exactly.
But a week later she's going to be dead, so then she'll never have known.
Because normally, if someone's getting divorced, would be a discussion or like negotiation about if they want to change the school.
Yeah, exactly.
So it didn't make any sense unless it was they knew she would be dead soon anyway.
Yeah.
So anyway, so then I went back on the Monday and stayed with her. So the next weekend I was with him. I heard him on the telephone talking to, it turned out it's his uncle who has the same first name. So it's very confusing. The police were actually confused about this.
But there's a good reason why too.
Well, okay. Yeah, Ray and I were discussing like if that was part of his cunning or if that was just lucky for him.
Yeah, well, the thing is, what she's saying is she actually called her dad Pat, right?
Yeah.
Like she didn't call, hey, Dad. She called her own dad Pat. And then the uncle's name was Pat. So when she said, oh, I stayed over, well, she'll explain that here in a second. I was with Pat. They figured they were talking about, well, her dad, because that's what she always called him. But it was the other Pat.
Yeah, the police report, apparently they noted from that time, she calls her father. They thought it was unusual that I called my father Pat, but they didn't understand there was another Pat that he had arranged for me to be with the night she was murdered. And so that's why,
we were wondering, though, if that was something he even planned, but that would be really cunning to do that, like to literally have you start calling him Pat. Because eventually he's going to have you stay with a Pat, and then maybe you would accidentally just, I was with Pat, and then they would assume it was him. But I mean, that would be really like deep level thinking, right?
Yeah, and I do think, and we'll get into it, but he didn't expect her body to be found, so maybe he didn't even think it was going to get to the stage with the police ever talking to me,
right?
But anyway, So anyway, I heard him on the phone talking to his Uncle Pat. And I remember this so clearly. And it's been verified and police recorded phone calls since then. This is very accurate. So he didn't, I remember thinking it was so odd because he didn't talk to me beforehand, like, oh, do you want to go to Uncle Pat's house? I hadn't seen him all summer, except for that one weekend where they enrolled me in the different school. And he was arranging for me to spend the night with Uncle Pat. This old, kind of creepy man, who I'd never gone to his house. I'd hardly seen him, and I'd never gone to his house. I knew he didn't like my mother. I hadn't gone to his house, never stayed there on my own at all. Anyway, so he was arranging me to spend the night. Anyway, and when my father got off the phone, I said, oh, I don't want to do that. And he said, oh, well, I've arranged it now. I don't want to hurt his feelings. I thought it was something you'd want to do. And so I was insistent. I didn't want to spend the night there. He said, okay, well, just go for a couple hours and I'll pick you up. You don't have to spend the night.
Go for a couple hours. Why? Did he tell you what the reason why he wanted to bring you over there?
Well, it's just what I've said just now.
I mean, but the reason he brought you over there? Oh, I guess I missed that. We talked about it earlier.
He didn't give me a good reason. Because that's the night he was going to kill her. But of course, he didn't say that.
Yeah, that would be the reason, the real reason. But what did he tell you? Like, hey, man.
I just thought it was, it was odd. That's why I remembered it so clearly. Yeah. I thought it was very odd at the time. He was just arranging it. And I told him I didn't want to do it after I heard him on the phone. And he just cajoled me into doing it. Oh, I've already arranged it, Uncle Pat. I thought you'd want to do it. He wants to see you.
Wow, what a miracle. The same night that your mom gets killed, you just set up this random, hey, Uncle Pat that you've never spent really any alone time with like that. Yeah. He wants to see you for a couple hours.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Jumping ahead, it ended up being more than a couple hours, but I guess if I'm telling this linearly,
well, that's what he told you. You were going to just be there for a couple of months. Yeah.
Right. I mean, originally he was spending the whole night, but I think that's because I was objecting so much to it.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
To get me to go, he said, "Oh, just for a couple hours." Then that was like what he negotiated with me. So, do you want to like continue with my memory of it, or do we want to like?
Well, I would use your memory and put in the actual pieces of information that you know now.
All right.
Just tell the story.
Okay, so what I didn't know at the time, but we now know, Gray was going through some of the evidence. There's several pieces of evidence to support this. So, including my mom's diary. She wrote that he called her. So she was supposed to pick me up on the Monday morning, right? The 9th. And he called her and told, you have to come instead of on the 9th, like we had previously, or, agreed in our temporary agreement, you have to come Sunday night at 8 to pick her up. And my mother, she writes about how he said he needed he insisted that she needed to do this because he was going out on a business trip at midnight. And my mother said in her diary, and like this is confirmed by many friends, she was arranging a party at that like residential hotel with like her new friends there. And she said that to him, like, well, and she apparently even said, well, can you bring her here? And he said, no, you have to come here. And so then, so she wrote all about that in the diary. She told her friends like how annoying that was. She was at the party that she was arranging. She told everyone at the party, I'm going to go pick up Allison. There's several witnesses have made like statements. And they describe what she was wearing at the time. One of them said like, oh, I have to go get my baby. I'll be right back. They knew her husband was like abusive. And as Gray pointed out, it's like a 9-minute drive, right?
Yeah, it's only one, not even, it's like a 2-mile drive.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so she left in her yellow Buick. Oh, sorry. Yeah, she left in her yellow Buick. Everyone, these people said she left in her yellow Buick. And then, there's witnesses.
Hey, let me summarize this really quick. So then go right to your yellow Buick part, okay? So she was supposed to, Allison on the screen right here was supposed to, basically, she was supposed to be picked up by her mother on the 9th, all right? But she was actually sent over to the uncle's house on the night of the 8th, Allison was, unbeknownst to her mother, who then went over to pick up Allison because the father had said, hey, you need to come pick her up. I'm going on this business trip. So, I meant to say, Nancy. So Nancy went over there at 8 o'clock on the 8th to go pick up Allison, but Allison's not there because he'd sent her over to the uncle's house. And, and she was using that same Buick, right? Is that a pretty good summarization? Right.
Yeah, exactly. So that was her car. Like when we left, when we moved out, she took her car with her. He had a Mercedes. She had a Buick.
And you have a bunch of witnesses who knew that she was going to pick you up early, etc. Yeah. Right. You got a bunch of
exactly. Yeah. Then people saw her car in the driveway. Like one of the tenants that lived above it in the same house, but like in the unit above is a duplex. That woman said, Gray and I were just going over it. I think it was 8:20. She said she saw the Buick in the driveway, and the police confirmed. This is all like from police reports. The police confirmed that like 8:20 would have been accurate based on when that woman said I guess she'd gone to a movie. She was coming home. And she saw the Buick there, and that would be consistent. Her seeing the Buick getting home at that time at 8 would be consistent with 8:20. So there were multiple people that saw the yellow Buick.
Parked right there, right? Like
her big yellow, ugly yellow Buick.
but parked right there, right, with a face in towards that door, right?
Yeah.
So kind of a little bit out into the sidewalk, probably. Then.
No, it wouldn't have been. Maybe it looks like it would have been, but it wouldn't.
Okay.
Yeah. My mother in the past, she had gotten tickets for parking because you're not allowed to park in San Francisco. You can't park in your own drive. Oh yeah, like that car is. See.
But see how it's kind of out a little bit, like
Yeah, so she would have pulled in like that car. Like you could still walk down the driveway, but still San Francisco law at the time, anyways, you weren't supposed to do that. Anyway, but yeah, she thought she was just like pulling in to pick me up. So like she wouldn't have needed to go park inside the garage.
Yeah, so she was just parking her car outside and she was going to go in to pick you up. But lo and behold, you're not there because you're over at your Uncle Pat's house.
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm. So there's witnesses placing her car there. It made it there. And we know it made it there because, as we'll find out later, the Buick is in that very same garage that we're looking at right there when the police get there. However, it could have been in a different one, but go ahead and continue on.
Okay, so then meanwhile, I was at Uncle Pat's house. It was starting... I was, expecting my father to pick me up. It was I remember it was like getting darker and darker. And he promised I didn't have to spend the night. Then a phone call came in I didn't speak to my father. A phone call came in to Uncle Pat and he said, "Oh, your dad can't pick you up. He had car trouble. And so you have to spend the night." And I felt like really upset about that because of the whole him promising me like I wouldn't have to spend the night. So I remember this all very clearly. And I said to Uncle Pat, like, well, why can't he take a taxi? And Uncle Pat just came up with some like nonsense, like that you kind of tell a 5-year-old, like, oh, he has to stay with the car to make sure they repair it properly or, some kind of nonsense. Anyway, so then... Yeah, so my father didn't come and pick me up that night. We know that was the night she was murdered.
And he knew the whole time that you were going to be staying overnight there. Even if he told you, "Oh, I'll pick you up earlier," he just wanted to kind of trick you into going there. And likely his uncle, your uncle, knew that you were staying overnight too. The whole time.
I'm not completely sure if my uncle, in retrospect, I know from what my uncle, it's my great uncle, told to other relatives. I think he may not have been complicit in the planning of it. Like, oh yeah, sure, I'll take Alison. And then my father cancels coming to pick me up. And then it was only in retrospect, he was like, oh my God, that's Nancy just got murdered. And that was that night. But he didn't tell anyone because like his family just circle the wagons around my father.
Is there anybody like the witnesses? Are they all here? Would they all be like hearsay witnesses at this point? I mean, like if you said, "Oh, so and so told me this," and how would that work?
There is a lot of hearsay in this. However, the part that I'm telling, the really important part about how I was at Uncle Pat's that night, and my father, didn't pick me up and. So the police have a recorded phone call in adulthood. Sorry, let me explain this. Okay. Well, in my adulthood. So when I start like questioning whether my father's guilty, when
you're 31 years old, years old.
That's when I had like Sarah. I had Sarah when I was 30. And so, when I was like 31, I contacted the police. Like they start looking into it again. The DA asks me to come out and like do a police recorded phone call. Maybe we can get him confessing. So I went out to the Foster City Police. They recorded a phone call where my father says all kinds of incriminating things. And he didn't like exactly write out confess, but that phone call, which the police, I said, wasn't the night Nancy was murdered. You had me at Uncle Pat's house. And he said, yes. And I asked him again, like, well, why did you do that? And he said, oh, my car broke down. And I said, well, you told me over the years, like your car broke down, but also you had too many drinks and you couldn't like come to pick me up because, drunk driving. And he said, oh yeah, well, both things are true. My car broke down and I had some beers.
Did he explain to you on that one why he brought you over there? I mean, not the real reason, but that night in that call, like why he was having you stay there again.
He didn't say in the call, I brought you there so I could kill her. He said, yeah, that was the night I brought you there. You weren't supposed to, I spend the night, but then my car broke down.
But I mean, I guess the thing is like, it's kind of a weird, I get what you're saying, but again, like we were talking about, like just, hey, your uncle hadn't seen you for a while, so I brought you over there. I mean, it's just sort of an interesting thing because that sort of traps him and he doesn't have a good answer for that question.
No, he doesn't have a good answer.
Yeah.
He doesn't. And then, if we're jumping to that phone call that was recorded, like I said, like I accused him of killing my mom, and he said, and I told him I was afraid of him, and I was afraid, like I was in fear for my children. And he said, well, you wouldn't do that to your own daughter. Like he didn't say, oh, I didn't kill your mom, so I wouldn't kill anyone. He's like, well, I wouldn't kill you. I would kill her, but I wouldn't kill, there's stuff like that.
Like it kind of implied it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then he also said, like, well, if I did it, it's kind of an OJ statement. If I did it, it would have been to protect you because you would have ended up being a druggie, as was his word, if like she hadn't been murdered. So he's also justifying why he did it.
Okay, so this little aside that we had proves that she really was at Uncle Pat's house that night, and they just happened to have the same first name. And unfortunately for the original investigators, you actually called your dad Pat at the time, so they weren't able to go, well, who's Pat? So they weren't able to realize that you would call your dad and somebody else Pat. There's two people that you might have called Pat. And so the thing is they didn't put, obviously somebody didn't do enough digging around at the time, because I mean, it seems like somebody should have been able to figure out that you in fact were staying, because that's a huge part of the case.
Yeah, I think it is a huge part, which is, and they still arrested him thinking his lawyers, I mean, in a sense it gets, and this is why my channel is called My Father's Alibi. His lawyers argued that, well, Alison was with her dad that night. You saw the apartment. There's no way that this violent crime could have occurred and like the little girl slept through it. And so they claimed I was his alibi, but I was his alibi, but his false alibi. But I think that's one reason he used me to lure her. He used me in so many ways in his crime. He used me as bait to lure my mother. And he used me as an alibi, even though he had me, somewhere else. Yeah,
it's weird because that actually, his own recorded phone call, you were on the call. You don't have a copy of it, but you were on the call, so you know what he said. He basically proves that you aren't your father's alibi.
Right.
Right. You know what I mean? I mean, that's basically what he's saying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so we're back. Now we're back at. So you've just you've proven the fact that you were there. So he wanted to make. Okay. I mean, at your uncle's house, he got rid of you so he could do what he was doing. And now what?
Okay, so should we explain like the autopsy, which will explain what happened that night? Is that how you?
Well, no, I would just kind of go into like, then you got picked up, and then eventually you find out she's there, and then get into where she was found in the water, or maybe you heard about that, and then get into.
Oh, you want to do it from my perspective?
Well, yeah, but just kind of put it both in at the same time, kind of like do your own perspective, and then fill it in with the factual stuff. I know it's hard. I know it's hard.
My perspective. Okay, so I was. Well, I think for the listeners, like for the linearity, can we maybe explain what happened to her that night, and then go back to what I knew? Because basically, I didn't. Okay. So, based on the autopsy and when she was found, so she was strangled. I mean, if you wanted to pull up that description, she was strangled. She was then bound in the sleeping bag that had been in the trunk of her Buick car. So we know the killer had her Buick. And the killer, my father, he wrapped rope. He put her in the sleeping bag. Oh, he stripped her clothing, which is relevant because her clothing was found at his place. So he stripped her clothing, put her in the sleeping bag, and like bound it and weighted it down with a cinder block. Then he dumped her body in the bay, San Francisco Bay.
Over here.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
Yeah, and I think he, at first he was saying to me like, "Oh, she's abandoned you. It was like too stressful going through a divorce and being your mom." And I think he didn't think her body was going to be found.
He must not have waited. I mean, that's pretty quick to. I mean, I don't want to get too, but usually it's like the body gases are what are actually enough to pull even weighted bodies up.
Yeah.
So that was so he must barely even weighted her down, not enough to keep her down.
I think it was only one cinder block, and for whatever reason, like she was found within like the next morning. So like that's how the timing of her death is, when it's like the next morning, then the autopsy is pretty accurate. Like, oh, she died from, the autopsy said like 24 to 12 hours. And it was like 12 hours that she was.
I mean, it's interesting because it's almost like really one of the worst planned homicides I've ever seen, murders, just horrendously planned. I mean, like, it's just like, oh my God, everything leads right back to him. And however, you're right. Like if your mother was weighed down enough where she didn't come up like ever really, then it would just been like, oh, she took off, and that would probably be you might have had, like suspicions and so forth, but that's kind of how it would work. And then it would have kind of worked out a little bit. I mean, the part about putting her car in your garage is just, his own garage is so idiotic. It's almost mind boggling. I mean, why didn't you? I mean, I think he used her car to put her body in the water, right? Don't you think? Because people saw it moving around.
I'm not completely sure. I mean, he took the sleeping bag out of her trunk. He might have used her car or his car. I'm not clear about that.
Yeah. I mean, it's just interesting.
To drive her body, I mean.
And you know what I think too? I was just looking at this randomly before you came on. It's just so amazing. Look how, can you see that little white line right here that goes around? Look how perfect that is. I mean, I bet you he put her in the vehicle over here and then drove like this all the way around and then came across this bridge and then went around just like this, did a big loop, and then came back over the bridge that's closer to where you lived, back to his house. That's what I bet. I'm just throwing it out there. But,
I think he knew about the bridge and he planned the bridge.
Yeah, so it was probably like 2 a.m. He's driving around, 2 or 3, and then when he's going over this bridge, he throws her in the water as he's about to cross over, and then he continues all the way around in a loop back to where he lives. I mean, it just kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I never thought about a loop that way. See, this is why, like, your expertise and how you analyze cases, it is really informative.
Oh, well, thanks. I'll send you a check later. Yeah, we planned that earlier. I said, hey, say something nice, Let's see. Yeah, so I guess we're at the point where we find she's found in the water.
And do people see that those 2 yellow pins, those are the 2 addresses. So that you can see how close. Yeah. Yeah,
so they're very close to each other, but from over here, if you were driving, I'm just gonna add, and then I'll add a little bit, but like he drove about 28 miles actually ish to put her there, and then back he would probably be going, well, that's not the right one, but let's see if I grab that. Okay, I'll just just do a little eyeballing here. That's going to be another like 28, 29 miles back, so a perfect little loop that he could just do, and it would look like he's coming in from a whole different direction instead of back the same way he came.
I actually wonder if he had used his car to drive her body, because like if he had been sighted or seen driving her car that night, that would have been more suspicious. I mean, he definitely had was used, like he took the sleeping bag out of the trunk of her car. So he did involve her car, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know the forensics on the cars. Oh, one thing that really, so he knows the killer had access to it. He sold after her death, he sold his Mercedes. He really liked Mercedes, and he kept her.
So that sort of kind of makes it seem like he used his car and he wanted to get rid of the any possibility of forensic information. And one of the difficulties when you have somebody that's, they live together and everything like that, touch DNA is just completely ruled out of being meaningful in any way at all. I guess unless it was on like a button of her pants, because she was found nude, right? Like inside the sleeping bag. So maybe if he touched something like that, but they never found. Well, no, they did find her clothing. It was in the house, right?
It was, in his house.
Okay, all right. So I mean, this is. I mean, if that's real, like literally, they found the clothing in there, and it's
it's described by more than one witness at the party she had left and said she was going to come back to.
Yeah. See, isn't that just mind-boggling? I mean, this case is just right now even is enough to just go. If I was on a jury, I go, oh yeah, he did. Yeah. There's no chance. There's no way it's 50-50.
For clothing too, if you those the two like reports from the witnesses, it's very detailed. It's not like just her shirt or something. It's like, I think like her like her pants, her shoes, her purse. And you can tell from the description, like they're clearly describing the same thing. It's not like the way describing like a color as like olive green, and the other would say like brownish green, like about her pants, I think it was. So, but you can tell they're talking about the same thing. And those clothing, that.
And why would they even be in his house? Because she's already moved out. That's another point to look at. Like she's moved out, so why would her clothing be sitting in there? Right?
I've wondered, because he didn't expect her to be found so quickly, and was he keeping her clothing as a like, why didn't he throw it out? And I thought maybe it was even because in San Francisco they just collect trash once a day. I mean, once a week.
I was more thinking about the
like maybe,
like, yeah, I know what you're saying. Like he was gonna like
found his trash.
He could have thrown it away a week later, and nobody would have ever noticed because her body wasn't found.
But yeah, they came to search our place within the week.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm saying is, as a common sense thought, is why would her clothing be in his house? Because she'd already moved out. None of her clothing would be there anymore. And it just happens to be the same clothing that she wore to come pick you up in. You see what I'm saying? Like, why is...
No, I know. It's really incriminating.
Yeah, it's like...
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you, yeah.
It's crazy. It shouldn't be... there's no good explanation of why her clothing is even in the house at all. Because they're getting a divorce and she moved out. And it just so happens the set of clothing that was found in the house is the same one that people reported her wearing as she went to go pick you up. See, that would be what a prosecutor would be saying to the jury. These guys, man, they're actually dropping the ball here. This case is one I could go sell it. Anyway, so I guess
you want to read what the prosecutor said from that you read last night, but maybe there's some people that didn't hear it. Because I think it's really interesting what the prosecutor said when they were dropping the charges. They said, like, oh, we're not saying for a minute he's not guilty. Like
we just don't think. Yeah, he said we just don't think it's over. It's less than 50% chance of winning the case.
And the police department is saying we really disagree with this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know where. There was a couple different documents, but I think this is better just going over it like this.
Okay. Yeah.
I think people are interested. So let's see. Yeah, man, that's crazy. I've already heard like 2 or 3 other things on this one that we didn't know last night that are just so much more damning. It's crazy. So, okay, her body's found, etc. And then let's kind of move forward. I mean, do you remember?
Okay. So then, my father picked me up at his uncle's house. He brought me back. I was expecting my mom, because I didn't know he'd asked her to come the night before, all that. Like, I was expecting her to pick me up on the Monday morning, and she, wasn't coming. I remember feeling like it's such a similar situation. I was waiting for my father to come, and he wasn't He didn't come like when he was supposed to. And so I was just like waiting for her to come. And then, so then she never came to pick me up. As it turned out, so as we were just saying, she was already found that morning, but because she had been stripped, like there was no identification on her. So the police published in the newspaper like a description and then a sketch. Her friends were already concerned when she hadn't come back to the party, and they're the ones that ended up identifying her from the sketch. Those people like called my father, the friends, and said like, where's Nancy? She said she was just coming to get Allison and she didn't come back. And he said, oh no, she never came. She didn't come here. And then they called like the next day saying like that sketch looks like Nancy. And if you don't report that, we're going to report it. And actually they did then report it. But he then under that threat, I think it was on Thursday. So he took me down to the precinct and did report her missing then, like reading from a legal pad. I think that's actually in one of the articles too.
Well, that was a sketch right there that they pointed to. That
yeah.
One? So when he saw that, that's the only time he came forward and said something. Who told him he should say something?
When he reported her missing, this was already published. He didn't say, oh, my wife looks like that picture. Her friends were calling him saying, Nancy never came back. She said she was going to get Allison from you. And now the sketch of the dead woman looks like Nancy. And they then reported it to the police, like what we're just talking about. Her friends did. He reported her missing. And even though the friends had called and said, that looks like Nancy in the newspaper, he didn't mention the newspaper because he was still hoping like, oh, that body in the bay doesn't get connected with like my wife going missing. But the police did connect it through her friends reporting. And then they came. Yeah. So within
this body was actually, they found the body on the 9th. I mean, the day that she was supposed to pick you up. Her body was literally floating in the bay.
Yeah, exactly. So that's how it was only there like 12 hours. Like he was hoping her body would never be found. And she was killed on the 8th, dumped, probably in the middle of the night, as you were saying. And then she was already found like the next morning.
And she had like a blunt force trauma too, right? To her head, something like that.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, I think she was probably hit in the head to knock her out and then strangled, because that way she's not going to struggle.
Yeah, that's what
strangulation.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So they didn't find anything in the sleeping bag. Well, see, that's the problem. Even if there's a hair of his in the sleeping bag, it's totally reasonable because they were married and they're in the same cars and things like that. That's the problem with that kind of.
Well, you wouldn't expect his DNA to be under her fingernails. And
no.
Did tell me, I mean, I don't think they had like DNA testing in 1982, but the police told me that they had sent the clippings like more recently to the FBI for analysis, her nail clippings, and it was still like waiting in a line.
No, they just recently sent those, so they've stored that.
Recently, I said like it was like when I was 31.
Oh, okay. Yeah. They should try it again because there's a lot better technology now.
Yeah, and I never heard like if it got analyzed or not, or if it's just like just continued sitting in the line.
I bet you. Well, that's the thing is like if she was hit over the head first, then there might not be any. She wouldn't be struggling when she was being strangled. So, I don't know. So, where are we at now? He calls calls it in after her body surfaces, literally on the Monday that you were supposed to be picked up, and then he calls the tip line, not the tip line, but calls in. Hey, I think this is And that was when, on the 16th, when it was in the papers? I mean, way later, or just a couple?
I think it was the Thursday is when he called.
So that would have been, let's see, 10th, 11th, the 12th, something like that.
And I think the only reason he reported her missing was because his people were calling him and telling him that he needed to. Like you would think you would report your wife missing.
Yeah. Well, especially since her car, see, think about it like this. Her car is right outside the front of your house. And you're not worried, like, hey, where's this person that's supposed to be here picking up somebody? You know, I don't know. It just doesn't make any sense at all.
No, I know.
Ludicrous.
Okay, his explanations about the car, his two explanations. One was that he was being framed, but he also told me that he thinks a serial killer who was killing, in his words, whores, killed her. And I said, well, like if it's this isn't the police recorded phone call. I mean, he told me that like throughout my childhood, and then also the police recorded phone call. I was like, well, how would a random serial killer know where to bring her car? It wasn't where she was living. So how would the serial killer know to bring her car to your house to like frame you is what? And then he changed his explanation. He said, well, you know, it was my car. It was in my name. Both the cars were in my name. And she probably like brought the car back before she like then left and got murdered because it was my car. And like, you know, he's a very like greedy person. And I like, it is true. I tried to like, it's so bizarre that he brought the car back to his house. But I think it's possible that he was blinded by like his greed and wanting like everything that was hers and theirs. And he said like both the cars were the titles were under his name. So it was his car, and like he deserved that car. You know, like he just like wanted the car.
I mean, I guess a story you could say is like, okay, right when your mom pulled up to pick you up on the 8th, but you weren't really there, a serial killer grabbed her right outside front.
It's so ridiculous.
And then opened up the trunk and grabbed the sleeping bag, you know, taking all the time in the world to put her inside that sleeping bag really quick. And then, and at 8 o'clock in the evening, by the way, where everybody's walking around on the streets, etc. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. No matter what he tells you, it doesn't make sense. And I think that's how I would be as the prosecutor. I'd be sort of throwing out like little kind of humorous, like, this is ridiculous, right? Like, it's insane. I don't know why they're saying it's 50-50. If I heard 5 of these things here, guilty as shit. There's no other explanation. There is nothing. I'm just telling you how I feel. You know, that's my opinion, everybody. You can do what you want. All right, so where are we at now? Where are we at in this story?
So then I think it was on the Saturday. So like within the week, like her body's found on the Monday, right? She was killed on the Sunday, body's found on the Monday. Then I think it was Saturday, the police came to our house and asked to speak to him. And he said no. And they asked to look around the apartment. He said no. And they said, well, we have a search warrant. You know, I think they often do that. They ask initially, can we look? And then, but they had a search warrant. And they ended up arresting him that day. You know, like they found the clothes, they found the car.
So the clothes, they are certain too that was her clothes that she was wearing.
Well, the police are certain.
I guess it's no way to be 100%. However, it matches all the descriptions that everybody gave of what she was wearing.
Yeah. And it's not just one description. It's like multiple, and it wasn't like, oh, it was her like boyfriend or something. That it was like the one description's from a woman, another from a man at the party. Like,
and where did they find the clothing?
I don't know that actually. I mean, like the police obviously know that. I don't.
I think that'd be an interesting.
I'm curious as well. Like, was it? Yeah. Did he hang it up in his closet? Did he put? Yeah, I don't know where it was. Was it in the trash can, you know, and just the trash hadn't been picked up yet that week?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if it was in the trash can and hadn't been picked up, I don't know, man. If that's the case and they didn't prosecute this guy, then something's very else is wrong going on in the background that we're not aware of.
Well, John Kecker, his lawyer, a very high profile lawyer.
We talked about that earlier.
Yeah, no, he donated to the DA's political campaign, and the police wanted to pursue him. So it's not like the police think he's guilty. I mean, the new generation of the police throughout have thought he was guilty.
Yeah, no. I'm just wondering what he could possibly have said.
Well, I mean, I think he said, the evidence looks incriminating, but I have an alibi. She was here. It was not possible like that.
Okay, so you've always been used as the alibi, except he admitted in a recorded audio that sort of wipes out what Kecker, is that his name? Kecker?
Kecker, John Kecker, yeah.
Yeah, Kecker. Yeah, so it wipes out that whole thing. He actually said. Exactly. So now it should be like, okay, see you later, Kecker. We're going forward. Because he said it himself. Now, was it something that was legally recorded? I guess.
Yeah, it was. I went to, I live in Connecticut. I went to California for the recording. It was done at the police, in a police interview room.
Oh, wow. So you went all the way over there and then called him and then just for this, right?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, good on you. That's good. That actually might be the thing that solves the entire case. Yeah, I mean, 8675309. You can probably see her in our chat over here. She had real similar, not close. It's not the similar story, but the same frustration level in her own world. I mean, this has got to be just infuriating to you.
No, it is, especially as the prosecutor at that time said he encouraged the police and I to do the phone call. I don't think he ever then listened to it. And it could be prosecuted by either, and we went to both. San Mateo, that's Foster City, because of where her body was found, or San Francisco, because that's where the evidence points. So at this time when I went back, in my 30s, Gascon was the DA in San Francisco. Even for very liberal San Francisco, people were very upset that he was not prosecuting crimes and was not defending victims. I wrote him a letter, and
isn't he out of there now though?
He is, though. He went to LA. So
okay,
then in LA, and then there's whole Menendez stuff. What's so frustrating is, the Menendez Netflix, Gascon just, this happened recently. He admitted, since that Netflix dramatization, I'm getting so many calls, so I'm going to look at that again. It's it's just public pressure. Gascon responds very much to public pressure. And my father's attorney supporting his political campaign. I mean,
well, you might have a better shot now though, because he's not there anymore. So get a hold of the
Yeah.
I mean, I swear to God, I mean, what we need to do is make an 8-minute video that goes through each point, and then you send it to the right people over there. And then you just start creating problems, because this is one of those ones where there's no way in hell this shouldn't be going to a trial. And by the way, even if he's found not guilty, you gave it a shot, because he's 80-something years old anyways. But it'd be great if he had justice was served while he's still alive, because there's no way. And by the way, he's out there. He's not going to do anything against anybody by people saying this, because then you could bring up all the information. And
LA Times already published, he didn't sue the LA Times. And I've been saying he's guilty for.
Yeah, well, it's obvious. I mean, it's not one of the, he can't do anything about it. So if you're watching, which it might be, you absolutely did this. Why don't what you should do is unburden yourself, just like these other people. and tell the truth before you die someday, because maybe God won't look very
No, he doesn't
highly
believe
on it.
in God.
Well, let's just pretend that he did it right at the last second, like at the last second, the whole Richard Allen move, you know, like right at the last second. Oh, you're hoping for something at the very end.
He's not the confessing type. Like he's the type to convince himself that he didn't do it, and even if he did do it, it was the best. It was well, this is what he said to me. Like, he didn't do it, and if he did do it, it was like the best thing for me anyway.
Yeah. So basically, okay. So here's where we're at, everybody. Alison right here was supposed to stay over with her father's house, at her father's house, until the 9th of August of 1982. But the father called the mother and said, "Hey, can you pick her up?" We're talking about Nancy. Pick her up at 8 o'clock on the 8th. And so she went over there, and witnesses saw what she was wearing. They saw, what kind of car she drives and everything. And then a witness saw that her car pulled up to the house at 8. It was like 8:20. They noticed it there, and she was supposed to be there at 8, so it totally fits that. She goes into the house. However, unbeknownst to Nancy, Alison had been sent over to Pat, the uncle's house that same night. And then, lo and behold, the next day, Nancy's body is found in the Bay of San Francisco, and it's wrapped up in a sleeping bag that was in the trunk of Nancy's vehicle. And then they find the body. They see that she's been strangled, beaten over the head, etc. Then they go back to they quickly go over to the husband's house after they have identified her. Actually, it took her a couple days for that. And I think it's around the 12th. Goes over to Pat, the husband's house, and inside the house they find the clothing that she was wearing when she went to go pick up Alison over at that house. And they also find her vehicle in his garage. And for some reason, they haven't even arrested. I mean, they arrested him, but they haven't charged this guy since those days. They let him out. Well, we can't charge him. It's 40. We think it's only about 40% chance. And that means you suck as a prosecutor, because this is so. I mean, I'm telling you, you'd have to be. This is like one of those ones, and it keeps going, right? There's more things, right? So that's where we're at now. I'm sure I left out a couple items in there, but so let's see. After he came forward and all that, and then sort of how did it start developing over the years? Like, I mean, what happened from like 82 to 92? Like, what was going on there? Were you suspicious the whole time, or were you just
No, I wasn't suspicious then.
Yeah.
No, I like, he was my whole world. In fact, I was really anxious that, because she had he just died so suddenly. I was fearful, almost like continuously, that he would die suddenly as well, like have a heart attack or something. And no, I really idolized him. He was, I should say though, I know it sounds contradictory. So he had been physically violent with her, in her marriage, but then he hadn't been to me until after her mother died. And then he has a temper, and he beat me up many times.
You probably became a surrogate. He looked at you, and you look sort of similar. Yeah, some people are asking. We were talking about the uncle earlier. Yeah, why do you think he didn't come forward when you could see in the news that they thought that you were the alibi?
Because he didn't want his nephew arrested, and the whole family.
It was a family thing. Okay.
Yeah. His sister Anne, who was a high-profile lawyer in New York City, she came out and arranged his defense. They got John Kecker. They paid for his bail. But that uncle, the Uncle Pat, did tell a couple years later, another relative who was, I don't know, these names might start getting confusing with Anne's. Okay, so Anne is Pat's sister. And she's a lawyer.
Pat the uncle, right? Or Pat the dad?
Well, they're both, sorry.
Okay, yeah. Go ahead.
Anne is my aunt, so my father's sister.
Okay, your father's sister. Okay.
And she was married to a man called Ed Snyderman. When Ed was like in town on business in San Francisco, he went out to drinks with the uncle Pat, and Uncle Pat told him like, oh, Allison was with me the night that Nancy was killed. Ed then called his wife, who had been part of my father Pat's defense, and said, oh my God, Uncle Pat just told me that so Ed admitted this. There's an affidavit from Ed. Like when I called Ed in my 30s and I was trying to find out all information I could, Ed told me like all this that happened. He told his wife, Dan, the sister of Pat, that this uncle just told him that I was with him that night, and told her husband, never tell anyone that. And Ed hadn't told anyone until like in my 30s. I was calling all my relatives to see.
And Ed's Anne's husband or something?
Yeah, it's Anne's husband.
Okay, so he's not like blood related to you. It's just a
right.
Right. So okay, wow. So the whole family's covering up for somebody that they know.
Oh yeah,
killed.
they definitely were.
That's crazy.
Apparently, so Anne the sister I'm talking about, who was a really successful lawyer in New York City. She came out. I mean, she had a little girl herself, but like she left her little girl and came out to organize my father's defense. And apparently, she'd call her husband. Her husband told me, Ed, that she, call him every night. And she was vacillating between like, oh my God, he did it. I don't know what's. And then she called the next night and say, no, he didn't do it. Like she was in and out of denial.
Well, somebody in chat said that. Did you go to boarding school in Europe?
Oh yeah, I went to boarding school when I was 11.
So 6 years after that, why do you think he sent you there? Or did you want to do that? Or I mean, no,
I
normally people don't. Yeah.
He's I think he thought it was an aristocratic thing to do.
Because you went to Europe, right? So it's kind of like,
like he very much cares about
perception, like how he
exactly.
Yeah, right.
Like he, when I was before I went to England, he said like, I want you to go to Harvard. Harvard's the best school in America. Then he decided that Oxford was the best school in the world, and so he sent me to boarding school in England in the hopes that I would go to Oxford, which I did go to Oxford, and yes, they take so much credit for like, oh, if your mother died, you wouldn't have gone to school in England, you would have gone to Oxford.
Yeah, it's all, he's basically saying, thank God I killed your mom for you because you'd be a strung out drug addict on the street, but now look at you.
Yeah. And the police recorded a phone call, he had said all these years like, oh, you would be a druggie, she was a drug, as though like trauma of having like your mom killed and like then your father being abusive wouldn't be more likely to drive someone to substance use disorders. But anyway, I'm just repeating what he said. So in the police recorded phone call, as a kid, I did drugs. I didn't like really know the different types of drugs. So it was the first time I asked him in the police recorded phone as an adult in the police recorded phone call. I said like, he was saying the druggy thing again. And I said like, what drugs are you like saying she was taking? And he said, oh, I don't know. Marijuana. Like he didn't even have like a real story like related to the drugs.
Yeah. So this phone call that you did you do any others, or was it just specifically? It was just you randomly calling your dad, right? That's what this was supposed to be, right?
Yeah. And then the police felt like it was so it was a long phone call. It was probably like almost a couple hours. Then the police felt like the police, they were like also whispering to me. He didn't realize at the time. I think he now knows, but they were telling me like, ask, I was trying to focus on what my father was saying. The police were like also trying to kind of coach me
You think
during
they would
it.
just write it down what to ask?
I know they ended. I was like, I can't let
Yeah, what are you doing?
Hear you. Also, it didn't seem like all that.
Hey, ask him this. Yeah, it's crazy. Like he's hearing these whispers in the background.
And then they said afterwards, like, oh, he was so close to confessing if you had. So anyway, they then, even though like he's almost essentially did confess, just not as clear cut as like, Richard Allen, for instance. So then they asked me to come back a few weeks later to call him again. I did, but he didn't answer the phone. I just left a message. And so, yeah, that trip was
fruitless. And
then he sent me an email, my father, and that was the last communication I had with him.
They wanted you to just say, well, why'd you kill mom then? Something like that, just to see what he'd say, or what?
Oh, I did say that kind of thing. And he would say things like, well, you would be a druggie if she'd lived and she used, like that kind of thing.
Which is really saying that he did it, but this is why. This is why I did it, because,
like, even though, like, when I would say, like, just admit you did it, he would say, like, I didn't do it. Oh, but if I had, like, it was like that. Or he'd say, when I was like, oh, I'm afraid of you, I don't want you to see, like, my children, he'd say, well, I wouldn't do that. You wouldn't do that to your own daughter. Like, he wouldn't respond in a way an innocent person would, even though, like, the DA, the police met with the DA and like tried to, this is really like, there's so much incriminating stuff in this. And the DA said, after asking me to do this and like come across the country and everything, like, well, even if he confessed to it, you could say, oh, he was under duress from his daughter. So
that's garbage. That comment right there is garbage that he told you that. That's not true either. That's
I know.
stupid. That's not even true. He was just
that's when I lost hope. I was like, this DA.
Yeah, forget that.
That was the San Mateo DA. Then we went to San Francisco. Yeah, that was the gas phone. I mean, again, all this like that I'm talking about, I talk about is like recently. It's like 10 years ago. Well, it's just I consider it recent in terms of like compared to like when I was 5. It was in adulthood.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like that when Richard Allen said, well, if the girl took that photo, it wasn't me. Yeah. It's like no innocent person would talk like that.
I know.
So you have a bunch of samples of that. It'd be great if you could get that phone call.
Well, I mean, the police have the phone call. And I wrote down everything that day that I could remember from the phone call, because I did want to have it like all documented as far as so I think I have very accurate notes on it. The police originally said, oh yeah, we'll give you a copy, but then they said, oh no, we're not going to give you a copy.
So what was some later in the years, there were other kind of incriminating things, weren't there, throughout the years? Different conversations with different people.
Oh,
maybe I should.
Yeah. Like when, yeah.
Well, go ahead, and if you want to say them, go ahead.
Oh, it's just like, again, things that weren't like outright confessions, but like bizarre things that he said.
Okay, like what did he say?
Like so the last time I saw him in person, I accused him of it, and he said it wasn't his fault, and just kind of like smirked.
Yeah, that's right. It wasn't his fault. I think that was a big one, because that means he's placing himself there, knowing it wasn't his fault, right? I mean,
or like
even if it's not, obviously it's not true that it's not his fault. Well, it's not my fault. I think he's kind of saying, like, he knows that she was killed. He was there, but he's not to blame for it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see any other way somebody would say that out loud, unless you're saying that you were.
I know exactly.
You were there, but it wasn't really his fault.
Someone you didn't kill, you wouldn't say it's not my fault. I mean, then when I think I asked him about that in the police reported phone call, like referring to that, he's like, "Well, I meant it wasn't my fault because I didn't do it." But that's just not how people would respond. So how someone who's innocent would respond. They'd say, of course I didn't do that. Yeah.
Well, I just think that this is one of those common sense cases. You wouldn't want a lot of the weirdo conspiracy types that we see. It showed up in the Richard Allen case on a jury, but hey, they got lucky in that case because none of them were those conspiracy nutters. Because the thing is this is one of those ones that, circumstantially, it's just like a slam dunk, and circumstantial evidence is just as powerful. People don't really understand. It's circumstantial, and then they think you have to have something else. I don't know how does a defense attorney, what are they saying other than the stuff that you've said? What are some of the things the police say that's a problem in the case? I guess, when you talk to them, they go, well, we don't have this. What is it?
No, the police think there's enough. It's the prosecutors.
Do you even know? Because it doesn't even.
No, the police.
Right.
Police think it's really.
Well, what do
strong.
they say? That's what.
The police.
Right, I agree with them. So what is it? The prosecutor? Yeah, I totally agree with the police.
The DA,
I agree with the police, but no, what do the prosecutors say? Yeah, what do they say?
Okay, they say things like for instance, her diary entries. They say that well, that's hearsay, and she's like dead, so she couldn't be questioned. But actually, I think she may be in the chat. A friend. There's exceptions for victims. Like his defense attorneys could maybe argue that's hearsay, but her diary entries, but it's there's law. It seems like the law is more supporting that could be entered into evidence.
I think there's some Chihuahua in that dog there in the head.
She's not Chihuahua. This has been.
But you said isn't that the mutt though? That has a bunch of different ones. I can't tell what that is.
She's like we rescued her. And we.
But I was just wondering because the ears and the face look a little bit like a Chihuahua kind of. I was just wondering if that's one of the 12 different.
I thought she had pug in her. She has no little dog in her at all. She, but yeah, we rescued her from. I could go into her story, but
I can see the pug.
She almost. Sorry.
She has the coloring in the head like a pug for sure. The dark.
I know. I had a beloved pug who died a few years ago when she was 16, and then when I saw her name was Bindi, I saw her on Twitter as a rescue. She was so small, and in fact, she wasn't expected to live. She had to have transfusions and everything. And in fact, her litter mates died. And wow. I wanted, sorry. Why did they die?
What was the reason for that? Why were they all going to be dying?
Well, their story was, she was adopted from Florida.
I didn't reel you in on this one. I want to listen to this.
You want to hear?
I said I didn't reel you in. Now we're on a what? Yeah, I do want to hear the
woman who rescued her. She went pretty viral on Twitter. She has like this emu. This emu that she anyway, the emu girl, but she also rescues other animals. So she had Bindi and her litter mates. So basically she's a farmer in Florida, and this old farmer that lived near her, she was aware that he had herds cattle with Bindi's parents, and that the mom was not spayed. And so the mom kept having puppies, and he would just drown them. And Taylor, the woman I adopted Bindi from, said she offered can I please spay? I'll pay for your dog to get spayed. And he's like, oh no, I don't. I'm okay with. I've been doing this my whole life. When the puppies were born, I just dumped them in a bucket. And then Taylor said okay, well, at least the next time she has a litter, will you give it to me? And he said, okay, yeah, I'll do that. And so Bindi came from, but obviously his dogs were not well taken care of. She had helminth infections that her puppies got. And she was the weakest originally. And the others all died of helminth infections. And, but she's healthy now. Anyway, that's her story.
Yeah. Well, there you go. So what else you got? You got any other elements in this? I mean, I'm sure there's a hell of a lot more. But what we need to do is just put together like a script of all of the things in order, and then I mean, get the ball rolling again. I mean, you probably need to get the papers going, get this out there, and just say, look, I mean, this is so obvious. It's a slam dunk. And by the way, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. If he's found not guilty, I don't think there'd be a chance in hell he'd be found not guilty. I
I
would
don't
think
think
that
so either.
it'd be like a hung jury at the worst.
I think there's overwhelming evidence. I see cases being like successfully
Mhm.
prosecuted that where the evidence seems a lot weaker.
How many people are still alive that can, sort of verify some elements?
Most people. The Uncle Pat person isn't, but again, we have like what he said to Ed. Maybe that couldn't come in because of hearsay, but we
Well, he
have.
said it himself. He said it himself. His recording. Ed doesn't even. Pat doesn't even matter that much anymore, right? Because
Yeah, exactly. We have the
yeah,
police recorded phone call. That's
mhm,
so valuable. It's just my
yeah,
memory, and then it's verified. My father verifies it on that recording.
right. So Pat's doesn't
We don't
even.
really even need the
You
Uncle
need Pat or Ed. You don't need any of those guys because he says it
Yeah.
himself. All right. So you got, he set up an alibi. That's the part I missed out on my recap was that you were sent over to your uncle's house the same day that, you know, your mother's going over to pick you up. So that means he doesn't want you there to be a witness to whatever is going to be going on. And like anybody that would think it's reasonable doubt to, like, oh, it's reasonable. It's just bad luck that you just happen to be somewhere staying with an uncle you never stayed with before on the same day that he kills your mom or your mom dies and her car's found in the garage, her clothes is found in the house, her clothes. She's wrapped up in a sleeping bag that was in the trunk of her vehicle, and her car is in his house in the garage. So there was a serial killer waiting inside the garage. And when she pulls in, it's just, and by the way, the car wasn't in the garage, it was parked out front. So the serial killer then, after taking her out of the car, putting in her sleeping bag, putting him into his car, he then drove her car into the garage of your father,
The
right?
locked garage too. Yeah.
Wow, that's a miracle. Whoa. This guy should be like canonized somehow, like I don't know. This is just, it's incredible to me.
Yeah. And no, yeah, almost everyone, as far as I know, like as of the last time was years ago now at this point, but all the witnesses like that saw her car were still alive and were like still very much remembered it. They all thought he was guilty. Yeah, because like the tenant, for instance, the woman that saw it after a movie, she was like, in her 20s at that time. So, she'd be.
Yeah. Well, here's a good question somebody has is, did your father ever, when he was talking to the police, say, yeah, she came over that night, on the 8th? Does he ever say that? He never talked to the police, did he?
Well, there was that reporting her missing. And that's the only time. Then he refused to talk to them.
All right. So he just said, oh, she's missing. But he never said, hey, she, yeah, she was here, because there was no way to explain anything. It just.
Yeah, he didn't say she was there.
Because there wouldn't be. There wouldn't be any way to explain it. Oh, yeah, she came over, and then, well, how come the car's in your garage still then, sir? Well, she went outside. Well, how come her clothes is inside your house, sir?
Yeah.
Well, that's a little weird. I don't know how to explain the fact that her clothes are in the house and she was found nude. Yeah, you got me there. Yeah, there's just no,
Yeah, then his response is the type of thing like we know from that he says like, well, the car was in my name. But that doesn't explain.
That doesn't mean anything.
Maybe you bought both the cars, but one was your wife's car in practice, and then one was yours.
Yeah, who cares if the car was in the name? She was using that car, and she drove it to your house that night wearing specific clothing. Apparently, that clothing was found inside the house. And why would her clothing be? I bet you that inside that house, that was the only clothing of your mom's was in that whatever pile that was. There wasn't any other clothing of hers because she would have taken it with her when you went to the shelter, and then she probably stored it somewhere, and then when you went to the place at 44, whatever the rest of the address is. But
McAllister, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she would have taken it all that. But, then you say, well, she took all of her clothing, but the clothing that matched the description of the clothing she was wearing when she went to go pick you up on the night of the 8th is sitting inside the house. See how you're like chuckling when we were doing it, chuckling? That's exactly what I feel like. I think the jury would think the same way. They'd be like,
no, I think
well,
like
this is ridiculous.
Emphasizing how absurd it is actually is effective.
It is effective. That's what I'm saying. That's how I would present it to a jury. Like I would in the opening arguments, I would say this whole story. You're going to hear a story about, I don't, just go through that same thing and sort of have it in a way where it's like, there's no explanation for this, guys. And then they go through it, and you just prove each little point, and then at the very end, it's all over. So of course, we got the same, the crazies out there that, they come up with a different theory and come up with all kinds of other explanations. Let's see. Are you reading chats?
I wasn't really reading the chat.
Yeah. Let's see.
Looking at now.
Yeah, well, the case is open still, right?
Yeah, and of course, there's no statute of limitations on murder. I think that the DA didn't say this explicitly, but because it's a cold case and he's old, I think that's probably one that gives them pause. But the way I see it is, okay, he's an old man now, but that's just because they didn't prosecute. He's received like 30 years of freedom he didn't deserve. That's why he's an old man.
Yeah. I'm just trying to. I'm actually sort of stunned that this isn't something that they just do. Maybe they just don't care that much. There's a lot of stuff on there. Don't they have a cold case unit that just does these? Like
the Foster City. I don't know the structure very well. This could be handled either by San Mateo DA's office or San Francisco's office. I would guess San Francisco has a cold case. I'm not sure. San Mateo is a much smaller office. Oh, one thing was that, and I think she kind of fell between the cracks in a way, because Foster City has like one murder every decade. So like the Foster City detectives aren't by definition experienced at dealing with homicide. And also there was maybe less interest because she wasn't, nobody really thinks she was killed in Foster City, and she wasn't a Foster City resident. Mm-hmm. But because of like where her body was dumped, it fell. I think Foster City was taking the lead.
Well, how come? Because she's on the other side. Does it? I don't know how that works, because the other side is,
I think somewhere in the bay. She wasn't found in Foster City land, but I guess wherever it was in the bay was on where they draw the boundary for Foster City.
Yeah. Well, what other kind of information do you have sitting around? Do you have like in that binder? Maybe there's some more stuff in there that you don't really readily remember. I'm trying to. Well, here's what I'm trying to figure out is, what, other than just them go, oh, I don't think it's more than 50%. I don't know what in the hell. I bet you everybody in here, given this information, would vote guilty on if there was a trial. Every single person. I know maybe not Cindy, who's in there, because she's always like, oh, I don't know. This one's so obvious. Okay, I guess you could sort of argue, okay, the clothing in the house. Let's try to figure out, like, okay, you got the clothing in the house. How do you prove that that was hers? Yes, it looks like it. They got photographs of it, right?
Oh yeah,
And then,
they still have the clothing. I'm
yeah,
pretty
and then they could say, well, is there any other clothing in that house at all? And then you would say, no, there was no other clothing. Then you would say, okay, well, witnesses describe what she was wearing. Look at these descriptions. The only clothing of hers in the house matches that description. And she was found nude. She wasn't wearing that same clothing. See, that right there is common sense and absolutely, completely irrefutable logic where you'd have to be using unreasonable belief systems to get out of it and say, well, maybe there was another set of clothes that looked just like it. And that was there too. And then he threw away the other set. And, it's dumb at that point. But see, that right there is inescapable logic. So if they have that, the photographs and still some of the witness statements that said what it looked like, do they still got all those? Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Hey, even Cindy said, nah, he's guilty. Hey, that's a good, man. If Cindy J says that, man, that's amazing. I mean, I could put some of these on the screen if you want. I don't know. Let's see. Can you put stuff on the screen yourself if you want to? Like if you clicked on something since you're, or do I see it, or how does that work?
Oh, it looks like maybe I can. Did you want me to put something on the screen?
Oh no, I was just wondering if you had the ability to.
It looks like there's a button for that from the way you shared the StreamYard.
Mm-hmm. I just want to see if I went like this. Hey, it would be good if you could gather community push towards the police department somehow. Right, that's what we were saying earlier. Yeah, we just gotta. I think what it needs to do is sort of like in that DJ Ficky case that I was telling you about earlier. That was just languishing in, it was like, this poor community, kind of white, what you consider white trash, like, it was just kind of, they didn't really care at all about it. And it was just, it's, he took his own life. Don't worry about it, everybody. But it just wasn't. I mean, even the guy himself said, the guy that had the gun in his hand in that case, he said he's holding it at the guy's face. And they said DJ Ficky was holding it like this. And then he was holding a gun, and this girl came in and grabbed his arm, and it said, boom. Okay, so when the girl grabbed your arm is what pulled the trigger. So just that alone makes it not that he took his own life, right? Just that alone, that somebody else pulled the arm and it pulled the trigger. And then eventually we just put all these other pieces together and how ludicrous it was, almost very similar to this, really. And then they changed it to undetermined, and then there was an arrest made. Then the guy was found guilty of murder, I think homicide of some sort, like last year or a year and a half ago. So it was cool. You got it, and then it opened the door to get things going. Yours is still open as a homicide. So it seems like, why wouldn't somebody just give it a shot? This thing is a no-brainer to me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But you have anything else to add, or? We can do more shows, like another show another time if you want. Like we just keep doing them, do updates, think through things, put stuff together.
Yeah, there's I'm sure there's things I've there's stuff like what he said to my mother's mother. He told her like, oh, Nancy didn't suffer, which she found odd. She's like, well, how would you know? How would he know that? There's which I don't necessarily find as incriminating as some of the other things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my husband. Do you want to talk to my husband? He has thoughts about it.
If he wants to.
Okay, let me just go see if he's willing to.
Yeah, there was some kind of journal we were reading yesterday. You got to go watch yesterday. Well, we were just, I don't know. There's some letters and notes he was writing. Now, they were sort of weird, like, went to pick up my daughter on the 8th, but that's the night she was killed, so she must have been writing ahead of time what she was going to be doing, and she wrote that way in like future or like past tense, but writing it before it happened. Hello, everybody.
Okay, he's coming.
Okay. Yeah, I put a link to your channel in the description. People want to go watch some of those interviews and things over there. You've done other shows on it, right?
Yeah, I just started my channel like a few months ago to bring attention to the case. I did a show with Judy, who might be in the chat. She's a lawyer in North Carolina, and with another person whose sister was a homicide victim.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, my husband explicitly, he's not like that enthusiastic about it, but he said, okay, I'll come, but don't, and he's expecting I'm going to try not to interrupt him. Apparently he's afraid I'm going to, what? Okay.
Okay.
Hold on, I'll get another seat. This is Jeff, my husband, Jeff.
Hello.
I'll go over,
He's a cancer geneticist. So
I'll go over here.
The cancer, the DNA analysis for that matter.
Yeah, I got to say hi to you a little bit just back, Gray, before the live stream.
Yeah. Well, we have, I don't know if you know her, but we have Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick of the Identifinders International. She's like the founder of forensic genetic genealogy.
Oh, wow.
Not to, but she comes on, and we actually have this huge fund. We've put like $94,000 in over the years for identifying Jane and John Does and from criminal victims. So it's pretty cool, rewarding thing to do. But hey, what are your thoughts on this one? What are your thoughts?
Oh, overall, over my thoughts, there's so
Well, I don't know. Yeah.
It's really hard to summarize anything as in a particular coherent way. I'm sure you've been working very hard on this live stream to do that. But you know, I mean, I think Alison has done a tremendous job of overcoming a lot of hardship, and I'm really proud of everything she's done to make such a great life out of what she does, considering what she had to deal with as a young child.
Something I think that would be interesting is, although you didn't tell me at the time, the first time you met my father, you thought he was guilty.
Well, the thing was, I think for someone who undergoes trauma like this, especially a really smart person like Alison, there can be big discrepancies between sort of what you know and what you feel. So when she talked to me about her father and what she knew or didn't know about her mother's death, I think intellectually a lot of it came out very clear to me that that's what was the case.
When we were first dating.
That's right. So for me, hearing it, I think I got a picture that was pretty strong on her believing that her father had done it. I think a lot stronger than she herself had yet processed, so to speak. So I think for me, I got a very early introduction to thinking that he was probably guilty from her, really. Because I think she knew a lot of these details then, and she relayed them all to me in the same way she's relayed them to you and relayed them to people previously. And a consequence of that is that I sort of, got to put it together, I think, relatively early. I wouldn't account it.
Well, you're probably a logical, like a common sense, your field that you're in.
Person, and it's pretty straightforward. But also, like, I think the logic and intelligence of it was coming from Alison, not from me. It was like, she expressed it to me in a logical, sensible way, and I just had to listen. So yeah,
but it's sort of like one of those things where the facts themselves are just logical. I mean, it's like, okay, wow, the car's inside the garage, her clothing.
But how hard to come to that conclusion yourself in the situation? That's really hard because there's so many personal components to that. So yeah. Yeah,
I guess you'd have to sort of be digging around in documents that maybe you didn't really want to be looking into, but you're doing it, and then you find all these different things.
Yeah.
Oh, I remembered something that actually Jeff can speak to this. That that I wanted to mention to Gray. This isn't as strong as like all these other pieces of evidence, but you know how my mother was bound with like a handhold rope. My father was like really kind of talented with ropes. Remember how do you want to explain like how he helped us put up a picture with this like same kind of like rope?
Yeah, I mean he was sort of like a, I don't know, he a rope aficionado. He really liked to like string up things, like to make handles. He would make new handles out of things. If something was to be carried, he would quickly take a piece of rope and like string it around and make a handle that you could carry it with. And then, as Alison was just mentioning, at one point we had a very complicated place, like off of a balcony up, really hard to get to, that we were like, oh, we'd love to have a picture there. And he rigged up this, kind of Rube Goldberg kind of apparatus of strings that allowed him to sort of like string up the painting somewhere where it was really not accessible by any other means. So
do they still have the original knots and everything that were? I mean, that'd be interesting if they.
Oh yeah, they have the rope, and from the description, I think like lifting a body, dead weight is, because he's not physically that big a person.
So he wrapped around and he made it. There was like handles to be able to like lift.
Yeah. And that's something that really sounds like him.
Yeah, I remember he had some of those for.
Yeah, he put those handles on other things. Yeah.
That was a thing he did.
Imagine like the sociopathic, like he's taking the time to wrap the ropes around to make the handles. Like instead of just, I got to get her out of here quick. He's sitting there going, ooh, look, I made these nice little handles. I can,
Yeah.
I mean, if again, like, I mean, the thing is we don't know if that he built the handles on there for that bit. I think the case is really obvious. It isn't. I don't know what the hell these prosecutors are doing. Maybe they think that you could explain away some stuff, but how do you explain away her clothes being in the house and her car being underneath the house? You being sent over to your uncle's house and him verifying that he sent you over to the uncle's house, and then he doesn't get a hold of the papers for 4 days, the investigators or whatever, to say, hey, that's her, or she's missing for 3 or 4 days when her car is in your garage, for God's sake.
There are so many things that make it really, I don't know, unlikely to be anybody else, so to speak.
Almost it's not reasonable to believe.
Exactly. It's not reasonable to believe that there's some other story given all of the facts that apply to this case. So
totally agree.
They might be interested in what your perceptions of like his personality was when you first met him, and you can also talk about his temper.
Well, how long have you guys known each other, by the way?
Oh, we've known each other many years, decades now.
20 years.
20 years.
Okay,
yeah.
So way before that 2014, when you came forward, the original.
When I first met Jeff, I didn't think my father was guilty.
But as I said, the way she explained it to me made me think.
Like I had all of I had all these memories of like being with Uncle Pat that night, and that's
interesting.
So I could like relate to him, like my memories. But because of like the denial of, sorry, I have the dog playing with something here. The denial of not like wanting to believe that your father is, murdered your mother. Psychologically, like that's a hurdle, like beyond even like the evidence.
Yeah, but just to be clear, like that denial, it wasn't like she was denying that to me. Like you didn't say to me, he didn't do it, right? You were just struggling with whether he did it. But I think emotionally, it was more, for at least my perception was that you were emotionally in the place where maybe he didn't do it. But like, there wasn't, it wasn't like you told me, oh, he didn't do it. You never once said that to me. So it's very interesting. I don't know.
But so you didn't think he did it, but what made you not think he did it? Because you just hadn't been digging into.
I think it was just the horror of thinking he did it. What I think it's just the horror of thinking, oh my God, my father could have done that.
Right.
You know how there's family members of, we can take Richard Allen's wife, for instance. Like I think there is psychologically a real hurdle to get over, even when you know all of the facts. And it's like, how could you logically think it's not possible. Like people are capable
Yeah.
of like cognitive dissonance, and it's like I loved my father, and so my mind just couldn't go to that place, even though it was really
Okay.
suspicious, and I kept like
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So do you? What was the thing you were going to? I kind of interrupted you. You were about to talk about how he was when you first met or something.
Well,
His
he's a
personality.
very, or was, I haven't seen him for many years now, but he's sort of a modest, mild, not modest person, but mild mannered kind of meek, and as Alison said, relatively small man, like just kind of he doesn't take up a lot of space in terms of his personality or anything. He's very,
like like Woody Allen.
Woody Allen, very subdued kind of person, actually.
Mm.
But as she mentioned, like I've only seen it a few times, but occasionally, like when he would go past some threshold, he would go from being mild mannered and meek like that to being extraordinarily angry. I mean, just fumingly, extraordinarily angry. Again, not like it doesn't suddenly turn into the Hulk or something and seem scary in that sense, but just the amount of anger.
He did to me.
It is, yeah, I'm sure it was. It's never not scary for someone really angry at you to be that angry. But I'm just saying, like, he still was that sort of small man. But boy, the ferocity with which he would speak and behave.
I mean,
amazing.
Yeah, I don't think you physically observed hit like it was never in your presence that he lost his temper like that. But there was one time, I witnessed that many times, but there was one time he was like screaming on the phone to me, and I
like he could snap, is what you're saying.
Oh yeah. And I passed the phone to you, and you were like, "What is that?" Because it was like it was screaming like that. It wasn't, the words weren't even intelligible.
Yeah, but what's interesting is that to me, it's like this is I think this is completely premeditated. So I think he has the ability. Like he just has this rage that he can just because he sent you away, right? And then he has her come over the night earlier. I wonder, so he needed to do that night earlier, because I think Monday, if he said, "Oh, I'll pick," Monday night he sends you over there and gets Tuesday, things don't make sense. But so it's all premeditated. So he was planning on killing her. So that means he has this like rage towards her that he could sort of call on almost, right? Towards Nancy, like he could just call on the rage, and now he's going to go because he just hates her,
I mean, I think he can, he can lose his temper, but then I think he probably was in a constant, or that time he was in he was enraged with her for divorcing him. So I don't think I think it was premeditated, so it wasn't like a crime of passion in that sense, but his violent temper it was like, I think he was in a prolonged state of loss of temper with her.
So because it was obviously premeditated. So I don't know what the next, I think you should make we could put out a video that's like 10 minutes long or less that goes through each point and then worded in the ridiculousness of it. The way that, when you get the little chuckle going, it needs to be like that, sent over to these people, and you have to have each element proven by a clip or something that you have as evidence. And it's you were in that phone call, so that he what he said on that phone call, that he admitted to dropping off at the uncle's house. So you have that. You just go through the whole thing and just ding, 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 ding. And then at the very end, almost do a closing argument type thing. And you send it over to him. And you just kind of wonder, what is it that's in the background? Like maybe it's that attorney and something else. But what's making them not pull the trigger on something so obvious? I don't think you need to have every single, you need to have DNA, you need to have this, you need to have that. You don't need any of that stuff. The circumstantial evidence is absolutely here, and it's so powerful that 12 reasonable thinking people would come up with a guilty verdict. No, I don't have any doubt. The worst case would be a hung jury.
Yeah.
Right.
Being a scientist, I'm very happy that we have DNA as a tool in our forensic, but it's not like we never convicted anyone before DNA existed, you know?
Right. And DNA isn't found often at crime scenes.
Yeah.
You know? Just as, there might be DNA because DNA just exists, but that's associated with the case. So oftentimes it's not there. You know?
Yeah.
So, well, and we're not even sure if they did analyze her fingernail clippings with like the latest techniques. I think they probably haven't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think we should do it again, but I think we should also what we should do is a stream where that's all we're working on is putting together the video, and then maybe we have to do another one to just get it until it's done. Because it really matters. And then you start sending the video to specific people. It's got to be short, though. 6 to 8 minutes of just hard-hitting stuff. And then people have the time to look at it. When you give them a 20, 25, they're not going to take the time. But you can get it all, and you just got to really start ding, 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 hammer it home. And I think that'll be the answer. That'll get people embarrassed that they haven't already done something. I think that's just my opinion. But what do you think? Should we do that?
Yeah, I'd be really grateful for that.
That'd be cool. Yeah. So we could probably do a show where I have like Premiere open and we just start, trying to, even if it's just words on the screen and pictures, it's just, that's enough. Got to get it in front of the right person. Send it to some of the detectives, the prosecutor, and you make sure that they see it. And you might be the one that has to email it to somebody because you're a family member, right? So, and you just got to put pressure on them, because everybody that's listening right now, when they hear the information, they're sort of stunned themselves, right? So, I think if more people knew about this, the more stunned people there are, the more pressure you put on the people to go out and do something. Because this I didn't even heard of this case until you showed up in the chat, I don't know, 3 weeks ago or so. And it's just like, yeah, this is crazy. You got to be kidding me. So anyways, it's an interesting one, but let's just start putting together like a video. What do you think? All right.
I'm really grateful for that advocacy. Yeah, I agree that public attention really can grab the attention of the prosecutors. We know the detectives are already supportive of it.
Yeah. So I think once that video is made, they'll have something to just plop in front of somebody. Yeah, they could watch it and it'll just spread around. Because that was what I did, like I said, in the DJ Ficky case, is I just sent him a video with every single element. And by the time you're done, it's like, this is ridiculous.
No, it's a really good point, because I think like Gascon, the last DA to consider it, I don't think he even read the file.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. It probably has a note on the front with the guy's, what's the name of that attorney again?
Oh, John Kecker.
Probably says it right on the front. John Kecker's case. Okay, forget that one. Yeah, but he's retired now, right? So you got some things in your advantage.
Yeah, John Kecker just retired. But yeah, he was very politically
connected. Well,
we were talking about someone just that I'm a fan of, Gray's not a fan of, but
I don't
you can say it, but
I'm not gonna I don't.
Okay, just like very, very powerful he's a lawyer for very, very powerful people, politicians, and I don't hold it against this particular politician, but I mean, I don't know, why don't we just what?
It doesn't really matter about any of that. It just means he's connected politically, and he might have had some influence behind the scenes at a higher level to keep something from happening. That's about it, right? It doesn't really matter like who else he's defended or anything. What's your husband's name again? What's your name again? Was
My
it
name's Jeff.
Jeff? Okay, I thought it was that, but I didn't want to just say it accidentally.
He's a professor.
I mean,
At
the
Yale.
wrong name. What's that?
Oh, he's a professor at Yale as well.
Look at that, man. We got big brains sitting in here. But anyways, so I guess that's about it, I guess, for the show. But let's do another one, and we'll start working on getting that video. What do you think? Let's do it. Okay, cool.
Great. Thank you so much.
All right.
Yeah, thank you
thank you.
so much,
For
Greg.
giving attention to this.
Well, thanks for coming on, and we'll talk to you soon. I'm not sure how to end these. You just get out yourself.
Okay.
All right. See you later.
Thank you,
Have a good one.
Thanks to all the
everyone.
listeners for thinking
All
of
right.
this. Too.
Yeah. Have a good one. Bye. Yeah, I think that's how you do it. Just like that. All right. Not sure if we're still streaming in both places. Hey, thanks, everybody. So let me, I wasn't able to thank. Maybe if I go like that. Yeah, so we had Rosemary at the beginning. Thank you, Gray, for doing this for Allison and bringing awareness to justice for Nancy. And then Jen took it off. Thank you for sharing her story. Then we have Allie Cake. Then we have Danielle Savoy. Great guest, compelling story. Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. Sunshine Susie. Fitz. Thank you for your coverage, Gray. Then Allie Cake. And Paulette Leonard. And then we have Sybil Bergeron. Quizzy Cow Girl. Mothra. Tina Humphrey, who said, I'm so sorry, my father's alibi, all he had to go through. Susie Clue, Sandy Shirley, Yvette Fox, Samantha B. Could they up-to-date forensics on her body now? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think if they got any clippings and everything, I don't think she was assaulted like sexually or anything. So, it sounds like you just be pretty difficult. 8675309 was trying for a wave there. Then thank you. Then Tina Humphrey and Allie Cake. And then Who Knows just gifted a membership. And then Tina Humphrey. I say who knows all the time, don't I? Yeah. Oh, it's the bigger version. Yeah, these little buttons you press over here. All right. Well, man, you got to admit, like, that is so obvious. Allison was over at her dad's house for the weekend. Her parents were going through a divorce, and on the weekends, she would spend time over with her father. On this weekend, the 7th and 8th, Saturday and Sunday, and through the 9th, she was supposed to stay with her father. So 7th, 8th, and be picked up on the 9th on a Monday by her mother, Allison's mother, and Nancy. And then Pat, the father, had told Nancy, hey, can you pick her up a day early? And I don't know I think he gave her a reason, or some sort of a reason. I can't remember what the reason was. Can you pick her up a day early? And then Pat, the father, actually had Allison stay at his uncle's house for that one particular night on the 8th. And so, unbeknownst to Nancy, when she went over to pick up Allison, Allison's not going to be there because Pat had sent her away, so she wouldn't send Allison away, so she wouldn't notice anything. And then, I mean, it's just so amazing to me. So then, the next day, the father picked up Allison over at the Uncle Pat's house, even though he had told Allison, I'll pick you up later that evening, but then came up with an excuse that his car broke down. So he had to pick her up the next day on Monday. So he picks up Allison on Monday, and then, the body was found in the river, or, in the bay that same day on the 9th, Monday. But nobody knew whose body it was. But then the picture came out in the papers, and then that sort of forced him, Pat, to call and say, hey, I think this might be my wife. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said anything. He expected her to be weighted down and stay underwater for quite some time. So he wasn't really prepared for that. And then they interviewed the daughter. She said, yeah, I stayed at Pat's house, but Pat is her father's name, and Pat's also the name of the uncle. And later, when she was 31 years old, Allison, when interviewing her father, came up with the father said on the interview that, yes, indeed, he had her stay at Pat the uncle's house, which is absolutely significant. And then when the police went to investigate, they found Nancy's vehicle inside the garage of the father, Pat, and then also the very same clothing that Nancy was wearing when she went to go pick up Allison were found inside the house. Okay, now can anybody explain any of that logically, where, well, could have been this, or it could have been that, or it could have been this and could have been that? There isn't anything. And there's other elements as well. But anyways, that's going to do it, you guys. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. We'll see you guys later. Thank you to Allison and Jeff for coming on at the end there. And we'll just keep digging away, try to put a video out one of these days. All right. Thanks again. Talk to you guys later. And as I always say, until next time, be safe out there.